In this lesson, we learn about homeostasis in both the unicellular organism as well as multicellular organisms. Today's lesson is called Homeostasis and Cells. Our learning objective, as you've already seen, is to be able to explain how single-celled organisms maintain homeostasis. Also, we want to be able to describe how cells of a multicellular organism work together to maintain that homeostasis. So, what do you recall about homeostasis? This isn't the first time we've talked about it. Well, if you're thinking homeostasis is the maintenance of a relatively constant internal physical and chemical condition or conditions, then you would be right. So that begs the question, what are some of the things that a human body must maintain in order to be balanced and to function well? Well, you should be thinking about things like body temperature, energy levels, water levels, even hormone levels, and lots of other things. You may have thought of pH levels. Yes, there's lots of different areas where we must maintain homeostasis in order for our bodies to function at their best possible abilities. So, what things do students do to help the body maintain balance? In other words, what do you do that helps maintain your homeostasis? Well, for one, you should be eating well. That will help maintain your homeostasis. You need to get plenty of sleep. You need to drink plenty of water, which I think we've talked about in class before. We also need to wear appropriate clothing for the weather in order to keep us warm or cool, depending on what the weather is. We're starting to move into that fall time of year, and that's when things start getting cold, so we have to bundle up a little bit more. Well, we are multicellular. Let's transition for a moment, though, and talk about the unicellular organisms because it kind of simplifies things a little bit, and then we'll come back to us and other multicellular organisms. So imagine that your entire body wasn't trillions of cells, but was really only one single cell. How, if you were only one cell, would you maintain your homeostasis? Let's get into that. Single-celled organisms have to be able to carry out all of the functions that are necessary for it to maintain life. So in order to maintain homeostasis, unicellular organisms will grow and they'll respond to their environment. They will also do things like transforming energy, which you also do. And they also have to be able to reproduce. That is, after all, the definition of life, is it not? I think we defined life earlier in this course. So how often during the day do you encounter single-celled organisms? Well, you may or may not realize that you actually come in contact with literally millions of bacteria every time you brush your teeth or eat a piece of fruit, all of those things. So the cells of multicellular organisms, we have to remember, do become specialized, and that allows them to perform specific tasks that aren't the same as the tasks that other specialized cells do. But they also need to be able to communicate with one another in order to maintain homeostasis. So in this image, we see a slide, a microscopic image of red blood cells. And they're stained pink just to make them stand out a little more. And what they're doing is carrying oxygen to different parts of your body and to different cells. And they also, while they're at it, they pick up carbon dioxide, which is a waste product from the cell during metabolism. So the red blood cells are produced by cells that are found in our bone marrow, which you may have already known that. And their red color actually comes from hemoglobin. And one other interesting thing about red blood cells is that they don't actually have a nucleus. But these cells also have high concentrations of mitochondria. So if we were to draw a bunch of different types of cells on the whiteboard and explain what those specialized shapes and features that those cells might have, we might come up with things like fat cells. They store energy and they're kind of shaped like a potato or a sack. We might come up with muscle cells. They tend to be very long. They also have the ability to stretch like a rubber band. Or we might think of a bone or bones, and they are stiff and long, and they're able to kind of move like an oar in a boat, right? Nerve cells would be kind of like wires, like in our house, that carry electricity. They carry electrical impulses that are actually data that provide information to our brain and information from our brain to muscles and bones and ligaments and all of those things, our organs, so forth and so on. Very, very important, those nerve cells. And what we have here are some green oval-shaped objects in this photo. And if you're thinking, that kind of looks like chloroplasts, you'd be right. And this is, of course, as you know, where photosynthesis takes place. So what kinds of cells have chloroplasts? Well, you might be thinking plant cells. That would be obvious. But there's also algae and some other protists, actually, that also have chloroplasts. But by and large, when we see chloroplasts, we think plants. Plants have a lot of other specialized cells as well, just like animals do. And what kind of specialized cells might plants need? Well, they need root cells, and those would be specialized to absorb water and minerals. The cells in the leaf would be specialized to carry out photosynthesis, like we're talking about, and they also would be specialized in order to withstand the heat from sunlight. Plants also need some cells that can transport materials up and down the organism. All right, for a moment, think about how a grocery store is organized. Basically, the store is usually split into departments, and then each department is broken down into aisles, and then each aisle is broken down into shelf sections, which are broken down into the individual products. So a multicellular organism is organized kind of like that, and we're going to kind of look at those real quickly here. So first we have the cell, okay, and that would be the neuron that you see in the first circle right here. And then we have the nerve tissue, so that's a lot of neurons. You see multiple neurons all here, and that makes up our nervous system for the most part. But there's also a large organ that the nerve tissue is all tied to, is all connected to, and that, of course, is the brain. Okay, so that's the organ. So we have the cell, the neuron, it's a single cell. And we have the nerve tissue, which is a bunch of cells that make up tissue. Then we have the brain, which is the organ. So tissue makes up an organ. And then an organ and multiple organs working together. So all the nervous tissue and the brain together all create what we call the organ system, or the nervous system in this particular case. Okay, and so if we think about the entire organism, it's got lots of different departments like that, a lot of different systems. It has the nervous system, the cardiovascular system, the muscular system, the skeletal system, the epithelial system, the skin, basically. The skin system, I forget the specific word for it, one of those fancy science words. But yeah, lots of different systems. Like a store has a lot of different departments. Now, Cells in a large organism have to also be able to communicate, and they do that by means of chemical signals that go from one cell to another. In order to respond to one of these chemical signals, a cell has to have a receptor to which the signaling molecule can bind. So if it doesn't have the right receptor, it's not going to get the signal. Maybe because that type of cell doesn't need that particular signal, so it doesn't have receptors to receive those signals when they need them. So in biology, a receptor is basically a structure that responds to some stimulus. So in cellular communication, it's a molecule that's embedded in the cell membrane, and a signaling molecule can come along and bind to it, and this produces a change that can affect what's going on inside the cell, the activity of the cell. In physiology, it's a structure in the nervous system that detects and responds to an environmental stimulus such as light, causes your pupils to dilate, or I don't know what the opposite of dilate is, but get bigger. Actually, dilating is getting bigger. Yeah. And then it does the opposite, gets smaller in light. So in the darkness, your pupils will dilate. There are some junctions, like the one of human epithelial cells, skin cells, and those hold the cells together in very tight formations. That's why nothing seeps out of your skin. Well, there's pores, and so sweat seeps out when you're hot, but all of the fluid that's around your cells, that your cells are floating in, essentially, none of that really seeps out unless you create a wound, which then allows that, as well as blood and so forth, to seep out. But epithelial cells have these tight junctions, and these are receptors as well, that kind of hold these cells together, kind of stitches them together, keeps them nice and tight and waterproof. So next time it's raining outside and you can't find your boots, take your socks off, walk around in the rain in your bare feet, because your feet are waterproof. That's all for today and this lesson. See you next time.